These are video instructions for the investigation on composite and inverse functions. I'm going to give you the instructions through the video and you can follow along. Basically, in this investigation, I've created two different functions. And one of the functions is function P, and one of the functions is function S. Okay? I use these functions in my class so that I can predict what IB grade from 1 through 7 you are going to get. Okay? And my input is, for example, your test grade. Okay, your last test grade. So, the first function is the P function, and that is going to give me the predicted grade based on X, which is your input, which is your test grade. Okay? And this is my function here, 0.06x plus 0.5. We'll see how this works. First, take your first summative test grade and convert it into a predicted IB grade using the function P of x. Okay? So first you're going to put your summative test grade in. So I know this is a big dark secret, but let's say I got a 75. So I'm going to put 75 here. And then I'm going to use the P of x function, and I'm going to substitute the 75 in for x, and then I'm going to figure out what my IB grade is based on my 75. Okay, and maybe you're going to have to use your calculator. So I'm going to put like 0.06 times 75 plus 0.5. And I get 5. So my predicted IB grade is a 5. Okay, based on my summative test grade of 75. Now I go down here. I have another function that I made, which is the S function. What the S function does is it takes the number of problem sets I did on the first unit from 0 to 10, and then based on that, it's going to predict my summative test grade. Okay, which I just said I got a 75, but let's say I didn't take the summative test yet. All I knew was how many problem sets I did. So let's say that I did about 5 problem sets. So my x, which is the number of problem sets I did, is 5. Then I'm going to figure out what my summative test grade is based on the 5 problem sets I did. So then I'm just going to substitute it. I'm going to put 100 square root of 5 over 10, which is 100 over the square root of a half. And then that's going to give me my predicted summative test grade. I don't know what the square root of a half is. Let's find out. It's 0.707, and I multiply that times 100, and I get 70.7. So my predicted summative grade would be, for example, 70.7, okay, based on the fact that I did 5 of the problem sets. Okay, so those two functions, P and S, are functions that I invented so that I can relate an input such as like how many problem sets you did and figure out your possible summative test grade, 70, or I take your summative test grade, which might be like a 75, and I can convert that into a predicted IB grade, 5 in this case. Okay? So I hope you chose your own values there, or you could have invented whatever values you wanted to and put it in the equations to find the output of the functions. Now we're going to do something else. What we're going to do is we're going to put these two functions together, because if we put the S function together with the P function, then what we can do is take the input of the pages done, and based on that we can go directly to finding the predicted IB grade. Okay? First we'll actually figure out the predicted summative grade, and then we'll use the predicted summative grade to find the predicted IB grade. And then we don't even have to take any tests, right? All we do is take the number of pages that you did, and we'll convert that to the predicted summative grade, and then in Cascade we'll figure out the predicted IB grade. So we're going to do that for several people here, for Anna, Bob, and Carl and Denise and Earl. Okay, so for example, Bob, for example, he did 2 pages of problem sets. So then we're going to put 2 into the function s, and then we're going to figure out what grade he's going to get. So that would be 100 times the square root of 2 over 10, and see what that equals to. 100 divided by, oh, I'm sorry, not divided by, times the square root of 2 divided by 10. 44.7. So we'll put like 45. Okay? And then what about s of 3? We're going to do the same thing for s of 3. Did you know, oh, it's not s of 3, it's s of 5. S of 5. Did you know that you can, like, in the calculator, you can put y equals, and then you could actually put this function here, and it'll calculate all these in one shot. You don't need to, like, sit there typing in different ones. So you could put y equals square root of x divided by 10. Okay. And then we're going to see the table. And the table is going to give us all these values that we're trying to figure out. So, like, for 1 page, it gives us 31.6. For 2 pages, it gives us 45. For 5 pages, it gives us 70.7. 70.7. And then for 7 pages, it gives us 83.7. So s of 7 is equal to 83.7. And then finally, s of 10 is going to give us a 100. Okay. Alright, so we figured out several values for predicted summative grade. Now, Xavier, we don't know what his grade is. It just says x. So what we want to do here is we want to just leave x there as a variable. So we're going to put x divided by 10, okay, and that is the answer already, okay. Now we're going to do the same thing, except now we're going to use the p function to translate our predicted summative test grade to a predicted IB grade between 1 and 7, okay. So, like, for the one here, we had 31.6, and we used the function 0.06 times 31.6 plus 0.5 to convert it to an IB grade of 2.4. Actually, IB grades are integers, whole numbers, so it's not actually going to be 2.4. We could either round it down to 2, or we can round it up to 3. So let's figure out what the conversion would be for a score of 45. So that would be 0.06 times, and here we can, again, we can put it in here. We could put the function, which is 0.06x plus 0.5. And we can do second table. And now we can just, it's the same thing. We can, like, look, like I'm going to look for 31.6. There's not going to be 31.6, but there'll be 32. So 32 gives us a value of 2.42. Okay, that's about 2.42. Let's go down to 45. What if we get a 45 on the summative test? What would our predicted IB grade then be? 3.2. Okay, 3.2, you might say that means 3. You might say it might mean 4. What about 70.7? So P of 71. Let's go down to 71. What IB grade would that give us? 71 would give us a 4.76. Say a 4.8. What about a summative grade of 84? What predicted IB grade would that give us? It would give us a 5.5. Okay. What about a predicted or a summative grade of 100? What would that give us? 6.5. Of course, a 6.5 would round up to a 7, right? So we might, if you want to round these up to IB grades, you could say this is a 3, you could say this is a 5, you could say that this is a 6, and you could say that this is a 7. Oops. Okay. And last of all, we're going to take our function here with just the x in it, and we're going to figure out what's p of p of s of x, because s of x is the output there. So then we're just going to say, oh, it's 0.06 times 100 times the square root of x divided by 10 plus 0.05. And we can't simplify it anymore because we don't know what x is. Okay? Next page. Some students are happy with the predicted IB grade lower than 7. They decide to find an inverse function to figure out what the summative test grade they would need for a specific predicted IB grade. For example, Denise calculates she would need a 75 on the summative exam to get a predicted grade of 5. Find the inverse function of p of x that Denise used. So how do you find the inverse function? So it's like we have a function p which takes a test grade from 0 to 100 and it translates to an IB grade of 1 through 7. Now Denise wants to do the opposite. She knows she wants to get a 5. She wants to know what summative test grade she needs to get. So she's going to make an inverse function that does exactly the opposite. So how do you make an inverse function? Well, first you start with your regular function, p of x, which is equal to 0.06x plus 0.5. What's the first thing you do? The first thing you do is you rename the p of x y. So you have y equals 0.06x plus 0.5. You're used to seeing y instead of the name of the function, right? Now we're going to substitute x for y and y for x. So we're going to have, instead of y equals that 0.06x plus 5, we're going to have x equals 0.06y plus 0.5. Then we're going to make y the subject of the equation and solve for y. Okay, making y the subject of the equation is solving for y. So we want y by itself on the left. How do we do that? Well, we're going to, let's see, we're going to subtract 0.5 from both sides. And then we're going to divide 0.06 from both sides. And now we'll have y equals x minus 5 divided by 0.06. Okay, so that is our inverse function. It does exactly the opposite of what the original p function did. What this one does is it takes an IB grade of 1 through 7 and it makes it into a summative grade that you would need, a test grade that you would need to get a 7. Okay, so this is actually equal to the inverse function of p. Alright, now we're going to do the same thing with s. We're going to find an inverse function of s so that Denise can figure out how many problem sets she needs to do to earn a 75. Remember, s of x is that kind of complicated looking function, 100 times the square root of x divided by 10. And so what's the inverse function of this? Well, the first thing we do is replace s of x with 100 with y, and then we rewrite it. And now what we're going to do is we're going to invert the x's and y's. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to solve for y. So we're going to get y by itself on the left side. How do we do that? Well, first we're going to divide both sides by 100. Oh, I'm sorry, this is not 100, it's 10. And then we're going to square both sides. Equals y divided by 10. And then we're going to multiply both sides by 10. We'll get 10x squared over 10,000, and then we're going to cancel out this 10 with it. So we'll have x squared over 1,000 is our inverse function. Okay? Alright. Number 6. Mr. Tsubaki decides that his model is so great he does not have to give summative tests anymore. He will just give predicted IB grades based on how many problem set pages are done. Find the composite function G, which has input, pages of problem set, and output, predicted IB grades. So it's kind of like you do the S of x function, and then you feed the output into the P of x function, and then out comes the IB grade, right? And what do you put inside? You put inside the number of problem sets, right? So we're going to make a function that's going to be a cascade of the S function and the P function. So the way you do that is you do this. You make a G function, the composite function. And so first you're going to start with the input of x, and then you're going to do the S function on it, and then of that output, you're going to do the P function on it. So let's first do the S function on it, which is going to be 100 square root of x over 10. Then we're going to do the P function on it. The P function is going to be 0.06x, which is that whole thing there, plus 0.5. Okay, so this is our g of x function. It might be confusing with all these x's. It's like there's an x here, there's an x in the P, there's an x in the S, and the important thing to remember is all these x's are not the same thing. What the x means here is the input. Okay, so like the input of the P function, for example, is this, right? It's this here. So what do we put in the input of the P function? We put the output of the S function. The output of the S functions looks like that, right? X divided by 10. So we put the output of the S function into the input of the P function, and that is equal to G. Okay. So the composite function can be written as this. So you do first you do S, and then you do P on top of that. Or you can write it like that, which is a P, and then there's a little open dot S. Remember that the domain includes the possible values of x for the function, and the range includes the possible values of y. So give the domain and range of P. So P is the function which takes the number of problem sets you did. Oh no, P is the predicted grade function. So you give it a number from 0 to 100, right? So the input to the predicted grade function is to give it a number from 0 to 100, and then that will yield a number between an IB grade between 1 and 7, right? Okay, that's what the predicted grade function does. And the summative grade function takes the number of problem sets you did, which ranges from 0 to 10, and then that transforms it into a summative test grade, predicted summative test grade, which is between 0 and 100. Okay? And so what's the domain and range of g of x? Well, remember, g of x takes the input of the first function, which is the s of x function. The s of x function is first. It takes the input of the s of x function, and it takes the output of the p of x function. That makes sense, right? Because you start in my super great system, which is the g of x function, I take the number of problem sets you did out of 10, and I convert that to a predicted grade, IB predicted grade. Okay? So my x, or input, is going to be between 0 and 10, because that's the number of problem sets you did. And my output is going to be your IB grade, which is between 1 and 7. And finally, number 8. What is your opinion of Mr. Tsubaki's proposed method of calculating predicted IB grades? Why? So you can choose and criticize or comment or tell me why it's good or bad, my system. You can choose to talk about either P, S, or G. Whichever one you think is good or bad, just tell me why you think it's good or bad. Okay? And I do have a function like this to find your predicted IB grade, although it's not like this. Okay? So, that's it.